Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Introspection. I'm Amy Lindner Lesser, your host, and I'm here today to talk about celebrations. We are just coming off the holiday season, Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, where we've done lots and lots of celebrations. And often when we talk about grief and loss, we get depressed and sad, and we don't find ways to celebrate. So today, my guest, Empress Ladan from Leave It to Me, is here to help talk about celebrations of life cycle events. And I know she's going to have a lot to share with us. Welcome to Introspection, the podcast about moving from grief to growth. I'm Amy Lindner Lesser, your host. Introspection started out as a podcast about hospitality, innkeeping, and innkeepers. After about a year, I realized that my life and interests have morphed from hospitality to helping others navigate from grief and loss to growth and living. In this new version of Introspection, I will be talking about my personal experiences with loss, and there are quite a few, what I've learned along the way through my professional training, as well as from my coaching experiences. I'll also be bringing in guests to share interesting ideas. So grab a beverage, find a comfy place, take a deep breath, and listen in. So welcome, Ladan.
Hi! Thank you so much, Amy. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here, and I want to thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm so appreciative of you being cool with my asking to join you. This is so much fun.
Well, I thought of you after I attended a funeral of a friend of mine who was in her 80s, and she passed away, and it was one of the most memorable events that I've ever been to. It wasn't the typical funeral where it was either a religious or just a secular ceremony with prayers and a lot of sad speeches. In this one, we were able to share with her family and friends the things that made her life so interesting and exciting. While there wasn't a dry eye in the place, there were also a lot of tears and happiness and laughter and singing.
Good.
So I immediately thought of you because for those of you who don't know, Ladan and I are part of the networking group. And so I've heard Ladan talk about what she does for a while now. And I'm going to ask if you will share with our audience, a little bit about Leave It to Me and how you got involved in doing what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. So I will say, I think it's kind of funny that you thought of me after being at a funeral. I go to a lot of networking events, and there's this really funny guy who, when he sees me now, he's like, hey, it's the joy and death lady. So I'm glad the word joy was there. Otherwise, I would have been like, I don't want to be known as the death lady. But I love that he connected that I actually bring joy to a very hard event to plan, right? So basically, I will give you a quick rundown of how I came into the event world. I, getting the good things to get into college, I became the class president junior year, and I didn't know that included planning the junior prom. I loved every single minute of the planning process. I even had an ice sculpture, pretty cool, for a tiny little podunk town in Pennsylvania. But I caught the bug. And so I did events in college kind of on the side. And then in grad school, I specifically ran for a student government position that would allow me to be in charge of the graduation party. So I planned the party for 1,000 people, and it was amazing. And so from there was really it wasn't even an option to plan events for a living. I had a degree in international finance, and I wanted to be a banker on Wall Street. And I ended up accidentally in a telecom career that lasted 20 years, but I planned events the entire time. I joined the Alumni Association in DC for my grad school, and I planned events for free. And if there wasn't an event that was being planned, I would create events to plan, because it's my passion, right? So I attempted twice to leave the telecom industry and go pursue it, but it's not a very high paying field, unfortunately, when you first enter. So money and life and all that kept me from doing it. And thankfully, I was laid off, so to speak, from my last telecom job, November 1st of 2017. And they did me the world's biggest favor because it was such a bad way of doing the layoff. They lied. I had to get a lawyer. It was bad. So I would never go back to telecom after that. And I had a life coach that said to me, you're trying to go into events and it's not working, because entry level jobs, I was a director in telecom, it wasn't working. He told me to start my own business. And I laughed at him. I thought he was crazy because my dad's a professor, my mom's an IRS agent. We don't take those kind of risks. And then I started my business and I did my first event and didn't really like the business model that I had put together. And I went to an alum, an acquaintance that I had started to become friends with. Her husband died of pancreatic cancer, and she invited me to join the funeral. And the funeral was very well done, but it was the afterwards where everybody goes to the home, the people that are the closest. And I noticed while I was sitting outside playing Candy Crush on my phone that there were like people, because the immediate family and everybody was at the cemetery doing the interment. And I'm just wasting time and noticing there's some back and forth. And I thought, well, you're an event professional. Go in and see if they need your help. And it turned out the people setting up were just from her yoga class, like friends that didn't really know about events as much. So I went in, I helped. And then when my friend came in the door, she was so frazzled. She had just been at the cemetery. And I noticed that she was missing stuff that she couldn't find. Her stepkids were carrying the leftover food. There was nobody to greet her at the door and like calm her down. And I just remember going home thinking, there are as many components to a funeral or an end of life celebration as there are with weddings. And weddings, you have a year, you have a wedding planner, you have a day of event coordinator, you have people at the venue that are helping, and you're all celebrating something. Funerals and memorial receptions, celebration of life events, nobody wants to really plan them, but you need all the same things: food, alcohol, potentially a venue, religious clergy, something, right? That's similar. And like, so transportation, I went through the whole list, and I went home that night and thought, I'm going to find event professionals that do this for a living. And I found so few that that's where the initial plan to do this for a living came into place. And honestly, like, I would love to just do only end of life events, but I'm still finding after all these years, I'm still educating people that there is a resource out there. It's just not something people normally Google search wedding planners all the time. No one's really gone, celebration of life event, planner. It doesn't happen. So in the meantime, I do other life milestones because they're all important. Well, living your life and then having your life celebrated, all very equal. So yeah. So I like to tell you, and you've heard it 1,000 times. I plan events from sunrise to sunset. So this is where we can break out in Fiddler on the Roof. But it's baby showers to end of life events.
We're recording this a few months early, and it happens that today, which is August 30th in our real lifetime, is National Grief Awareness Day. And so it's very apropos that we're talking about the fact that we live in a society, at least, our US society is very grief adverse. We don't want to deal with our difficult emotions. We tell people who are grieving, don't cry, or you'll get over it. Don't worry, it'll get better. It gets easier. It's this, it's that. And it's because we're uncomfortable with our own feelings of grief. And I think that's one of the reasons people don't think about how can you celebrate a life? How do you make a difficult time a little easier for the people who are left behind? The reality is we're all going to die.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So I've created a funeral pre-planning program. And the way that came about was when I was in grad school, I was only 22. I was very young. A lot of the people I went to school with worked first, but I went 2 days after graduating from college. So I was having a hard time. I had a boyfriend of 4 years from my entire time at college that I had left behind on the East Coast. And I really was kind of being bullied by these other grad school people. Like they kept calling me a baby. And so one of the gentlemen, who very cute, by the way, was probably 10 years older than me. He one time said to me, he's like, "You're such a baby." And he spanked my bottom and said, "Where are your diapers?" So I turned around and I tapped his and said, "Where are the Depends? Your Depends." And, but so I was dealing with ageism, like reverse ageism, being made fun of because I was too young. But then when it came about technology, then they had to set up stuff in the classroom that they didn't know how to do. They all came running to me. But anyway, long story short, I was pretty down. I was really down. And I would go every day to our cafeteria, and there was this amazing fiery redhead like woman that would take our card, and she checked on me every single day. So I went from going through the line and talking to her for 10 minutes at a time to going to lunch or whenever she would be there, and we would talk for an hour. And so she is one of my best friends. And when I was out there at the age of 22, she invited me to Thanksgiving at her son's house. And her daughter pulled me aside and said, "Sweetie, how old are you?" I said, "I'm only 22. Why?" And she goes, "How old do you think my mom is?" And I said, "I don't know, 50, 55. And she said, "My mom is 72. So one of my best friends is 50 years older than me. And when I started the celebration of life side of my business, talking to her, and she has had 4 ex-husbands. And so one of the ex-husbands planned his own funeral. And she told me that, and it was right around the time that John McCain had passed. And if you remember, John McCain planned not only his own funeral, he planned a week-long funeral. So that's where a final gift came to be, and I've broken down the letters and created a little acronym. And the first letter, the first A, is for acceptance. So once I can get people to accept the fact that it's going to happen and accept the fact that they don't just need to get the paperwork in order, they can actually plan what they would want. Like, I don't want flowers. I already know that. I know I want Metallica's Fade to Black. Like, I've known that since I was 20 something. And, but like, I want people to know, like, donate to this charity. I'm Muslim, but I don't need to be buried within 24 hours. Like, I'm okay to let people come into town, and I want it to be a real party, right? So I plan on writing everything down. And so a final gift is working with people to actually say, I want a Viking funeral. I want no funeral, and I want them to document it, because as they outline what they want, they can also live their life in a different way too, because you kind of live with the end in mind. But then they also take the uncertainty away for their loved ones, making it a final gift, because then they don't have to go, "Oh, I wonder what Empress Ladan wanted, and why the heck is her name Empress right now?" So,
we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that in a second. But it also takes the responsibility and after a loved one passes, the first few days or hours are so confusing. You're so deep in your grief that it's really hard to make decisions. And if you haven't done any pre-planning, it puts so much more responsibility and such a heavy weight on the people that you leave behind.
Absolutely. And I realized that I didn't properly answer your original question. What I do for these individuals is, at that time of so many decisions that have to be made and you're numb, you're paralyzed, I call it, it's not something I came up with, but decision fatigue, right? You don't necessarily now want to figure out how do I find the right venue, the right funeral home? How do I find the, everything, right? So what I'm hoping to do is, and what I do for my clients is take that decision-making process and have them feel comfortable that based on getting to know them, that I can make the right customized solution for them. I would still bring about, choices and say, here are a few venue options. I've been to them. This one is better for XYZ. This is better for that. And then from there, it's still the event they have in mind, right? So, and the question that I ask all of my clients is, how do you want people to walk away? Like, how should they feel when they walk away from the event? Like, do you want, for, let's say, if it's a birthday party, like, do you want everyone to feel like they sufficiently celebrated the birthday girl or boy or the person that you're honoring? Like, there's just, like, I want them to know, because you don't go away from a party and go, I remember that they had calla lilies and this was, this and that on the centerpiece. You remember how you feel afterwards, right? So same thing with the celebration of life. Do you want it to be, some cultures want it to be a cry fest, because that's how they show how much they love the person. Some cultures want there to be lots of alcohol so he can drown her, like it just depends. And so that's important to me to know, but then I can then guide them with, well, if that's your outcome feeling wise, then maybe we don't hold it at a picnic park pavilion. Maybe we hold it at a restaurant, because it sounds like this is, alcohol is part of the plan and it's important. We would have to bring in a bar and a bartender. If we go to a bar, it might be, easier for everyone. And so those little guiding tips, but then also I do the slideshow for them. I do the invite. I do the, keeping track of who needs what that day. So they don't have to spend their time all of a sudden becoming an event planner as well as a great maid.
The logistics are crazy, especially in this day and age when family and friends are scattered all over the world, really. And
absolutely.
Do you, as the person, the bereaved, want to spend your time figuring out where Aunt Mary is going to sleep for the next 3 nights?
Absolutely.
Or how they're going to get from the airport to the house or the hotel, and then from there to the funeral home, if there is a funeral home. Those details that, we're lucky in the first few hours if we can put one foot in front of the other to get dressed. The funeral that I was at, her husband talked about having to get dressed for the funeral. And that for him, that he had to wear, he tried on 3 different outfits. The first one, and he told a wonderful story about how his wife would have said, if you want to go out with me, you're not wearing that. And then the next one, he asked a friend, like, does this match? Or he tried something on and realized that COVID had intervened and he couldn't wear what he wore before. He didn't tell her that he had gained weight or lost weight, but just that it didn't fit.
COVID did something.
Finally, his son came and the son said, try it with this shirt and then you're okay, Dad. But it was, it was just little logistical things that are so important in our daily lives that we need help doing.
The last celebration of life that I did, the gentleman lost his soulmate of 55 years. And from talking to him about how he wanted the event to go, I found out a few things. One, that he could barely get through talking to me about the love of his life. And I cry at every single celebration of life event. So I was very upfront with him. And I said, I just want you to know it's not very professional, but it is who I am. And I become, very overwhelmed sometimes. And I would love to know, like, what you're planning to say ahead of time, because I could tell it was going to be rough. He sent me the words. I had to stop in the middle because I was crying so bad. And then my kids were like, what's wrong with you? I mean, it could be a book or a movie. Their love story was so beautiful. And I am so glad that I could read that about his personality and how it was going to go in advance so that I could be more composed. I did still cry, but I wasn't sobbing as hysterically. And it's only from the planning process of getting to know these people that I can be more than just the event planners you see on TV managing a wedding, that you come in and you're like, put this here, put that there. I go and I sit down and I really want to know about the person's life, their time together, and if it's a family. But I also don't want to be their grief counselor or anything like that, because I am still there to get the stuff done for them, right? But I do love the mix of what I can provide. And I've been able to pay attention to the process many times. I've seen this every single time I planned an event, that they come in with a very small budget, and then as it gets going, it grows and grows. And so I have to be very flexible in knowing that what our first meeting and what the event looked like at the first meeting is never what the event ends up looking at. Like, they end up just, as they can start making decisions again, they start thinking about, well, I do really want to have these kind of flowers. This meant a lot to the person, or I want this, I want that. And then also, I have been told, I think 3 times now, that they could handle it on their own, that they didn't need me. And I was like, okay. The first time when the person came back, I was really shocked. But then now that it has happened multiple times, I actually leave the date open on my calendar just in case they have a change of heart, which they almost, for me, it's every time that it's happened. And I'm so grateful that I'm able to learn from each one of these. And that's the other thing. I hope nobody has to plan a celebration of life. I hope your loved ones live forever, but it's not possible. But a lot of people only plan this one time, right? And so maybe twice for their parents, but it's not something they're going to get good at. And I have more of the experience now. I know to bring the tissues and the pen for the, like just little things. And I really don't want everyone to become experts at this. But I do want more support for all the people out there in the world, that this is the party that really should get them the most help. So,
and I mean, it's inevitable that we are all going to experience loss at least once in our lives. We hope for most people's sake that it's not more than that, but it all depends. And you want to know that you're taken care of. Your wishes, if you are the dying person, that your wishes are taken care of, and that it's an event that's going to make you proud. I have some woo beliefs. Not everybody believes what I do. And it's certainly not something that my religion even talks about.
Okay.
I believe that we're all energy. And while we're here on this earth, we are a spirit or a soul that's having a bodily experience. But when we die, our soul does not. It's energy.
Yeah.
And energy never disappears. We just go someplace else, and I don't know where.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
I like to think that, in a celebration of life or even in a funeral, that person's energy is still around.
Oh, definitely.
We can communicate with them, and they can communicate back with us, and that they're appreciating the celebration that we're having in their honor.
Yeah.
You and I talked for a few seconds before we got on to record, and I was saying I happen to be Jewish, and one of the Jewish rituals is that you observe a yahrzeit, which is the anniversary of a death, by lighting a special candle and saying a special prayer, and you do it a few times a year on special holidays. And it's always been one of my, I don't like this. It's my argument with Judaism. And it's like, it's not that I'm ever going to forget the days that my husband passed, or that my mother or my father or my father, those are with me. The grief has changed, but those days are very much with me. But what I want to focus on and what I want to remember are their birthdays.
Yeah.
I want to be thankful and grateful for the fact that their lives intersected with mine and the gifts that they gave to the world. So,
Yeah.
out of defiance, because I am
Yeah.
definitely a rebel, I light my candle the night before their birthday, the
There you
eve,
go.
the eve of their birthday. And
Yeah. Everybody does what they need to do for them, and
exactly.
and you look for those signs and moments where I know people that are like, oh, I saw a butterfly today. That means so-and-so was visiting or saw, yeah. Yeah, no. And I love and embrace that everyone has their traditions and everything else. And I'm from Iran, and my friend bought me a book about funeral traditions around the world. And the first chapter was about Iran and how, because of the whole Shiite Islamic movement, and most Iranians are Shiite, they have a whole list of martyrs, like people that, like, they're the imams. There's 12 of them. There's one that, but like, if you've ever seen on TV, they like hit themselves on the one day, like, and it's like self mutilation. I don't know what they call it. It's horrible, but it is turned into a culture of the louder you cry, the louder, like, you yourself, you know what I mean, are showing that you've sat. So like when somebody dies, the funeral is crying like loudly and all this. So that's what I grew up with. So the first time I attended a funeral in the US, everybody was quiet and nobody was crying, and I barely knew the person. I was crying harder and all this. Like, I had to realize from there that we don't even grieve as cultures the same way. Like, religiously, I knew, Muslims and Jews, they bury them quickly. We can't be cremated and all these things. But
Or embalmed.
Oh, exactly, right. And so this is where, like, I'm noticing that my predominant, like, the clientele that comes to me are people whose loved ones did not have a traditional funeral. So I'm almost like, I like to compare myself to a industry disruptor, right? Like, I'm an Uber, like I basically disrupt the whole normal process of going to a funeral home and doing it that way, because funeral homes will host the guests, and, like, so this is more about the people that maybe don't have as much of a religious structure in their lives, or the DC area, like where I live, is so transient. So a lot of people don't have that family around. So they wait and they do the celebration months later. But, so because of that, and celebration of life thing doesn't happen with Iranians. They do the funeral, they do another sad, like, gathering in 40 days. The people grieving wear black, and I already know I don't want any of that. Like, do not wear black, So, but I think that's where it's important that, because everyone has so many different things, and, like, you have your own views now on don't light the candle on the day I pass, light it, on my birthday or other things. Think about me always, like the whole Valentine's Day. Don't show me you love me on Valentine's Day.
Right.
Do it all year round, right? So anyway, that it's because of people having their different views that I think it is so important that we get past this taboo of not talking about what we want. So.
And that's perfect for talking about grief too.
Yep, absolutely.
But Ladan, you do other kinds of celebrations.
I do.
You and I had a conversation about let's see if I can get it right, a vagina-bration.
Vagina-bration, yes.
Which was for someone who went through gender reassignment surgeries. And
Yeah.
I had a guest on my show whose ex-husband became a woman, or was
And
a
that's
woman.
who I did the vagina-bration for. It's such a cool small world. I love it that we're connected that way.
Yeah. And, I think that that's a wonderful celebration for somebody who finally came into who they were supposed to be, and to celebrate that. In the Jewish religion, we celebrate a bar and a bat mitzvah. which are
Mhm.
coming of age.
Yeah,
And in
I've
some
actually done
ways,
one of those events. So fun.
and in some ways, that's what this is. It's a coming into
It was
their
great.
entity, and
Yeah.
maybe even more so because this person is an adult. They were
Yeah,
much more aware of what they were going through rather than the 12 and 13-year-old who is really
absolutely.
no more of an adult than my dog.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I was beyond honored that a good friend, mutual friend, came up with the word vaginabration. I wish I could take credit, but she came up with it and has allowed me, I'm going to trademark it. And I also do first period and menopause parties. So those will also be vaginabrations because as the glorious female goddesses that we are, we should for sure be celebrating. But
And I
I
think
had
that's
mentioned to,
I just want to say that I think it's so important too, because all of those, first period, um, menopause are oftentimes where there's loss also.
oh, yeah,
There's the loss of youth in both getting a
yeah,
period as well as menopause, and we don't
yes,
realize that
that's
we
such a good
grieve
point.
those things.
I'm
They're
so glad you brought that up. I am perimenopausal, and I did not think that I would grieve not having I still get them, unfortunately. That once a month fun little present that I get is still coming, but now it comes with extra hormones and all sorts of other things. But it was kind of this, like, now that it's definitely going away very soon, sadness that I don't feel like a full woman anymore. I can't reproduce if I want. And I, trust me, that baby thing has been done for years. I do not want to have a child. I want the option of having a child. And what I'm finding is, what's so beautiful is that a lot of my friends are actually we have conversations about our hot flashes and our experiences, and also the being sad about the fertility, right? So I look back at when my mom went through this, and there was nothing. Nobody was talking about it. Even when I asked my mom, like, she's like, just stop. You don't need to even, like, why are you making such a big deal? Like, you're going through, and I'm like, I think it is a big deal, Mom. And she's like, and then she kind of blew me off, like, it's not a big deal. And then we had a deeper conversation one day where she admitted that she went and got hormones. Because back then, nobody said anything. Like, that was just what you did, right? And so I just wanted to be like, do you realize why it wasn't such a big deal for you? You were, getting help. And
I
we're not.
I had that same discussion with my mother, um, who had a hysterectomy and was immediately put on hormones, never had a hot flash. And I'm like, so then how do you know what it's like? How do you know? I'm sitting here, I'm bright red, I'm sweating to death, and you're like, oh, it's not a big deal. Well,
Yeah, stop complaining.
I'm
Why are
not
you
going on
complaining?
hormones. It's like
So from
very
my
different.
when it happens, and I'm sure a lot of people don't know, menopause is officially when you've missed 12 periods in a row, right? And so when it happens officially, I am going to have my own vaginabration, and I'm going to decorate, like, the room with feminine hygiene products that are cut up and no longer needed, and I'm very excited. But to just close the loop with the party for the gender affirmation procedure that our mutual person that we know, had. I take on events as if it's my own, like, event. Like, I live and breathe the event. Like, everywhere I went, I would see flowers that looked like potentially they could be used at the event. And we came up with all sorts of things. And I used my creativity and also my connections to people to have, like, one of my friends made us vagina chocolates to put in the penis pinata. So when the penis pinata broke, vagina chocolates came out. And then another friend's wife decorated the cake. And we went through the process of, I found pictures so the skin color would look the same as what we had added to the cake. And my mom, I dropped off the cake to be decorated. My mom helped me pick it up because I was doing other things for the party. And so like I will act as if it's my own event and take it to the point where I kind of almost grieve the end of a big event like that, because then it was kind of, I don't have to keep looking for vaginas in public anymore. Like, cause I was literally looking like, this flower looks right, this one. So, but yeah, it was wonderful because we all collaborated, and everyone chipped in with saying what they name that part of their body. And so I, as an MC, and that's why, and again, we can come back to that. As the party host, I also MC'd the event and welcomed her into the tribe of being a woman. And we helped her find a name for her lady bits by going through the list of all the options. And so, yeah, so we definitely, Leave It to Me, we don't leave anything behind in what we think about. So.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's great. I took a class at the University of Pennsylvania Med School.
Oh, wow.
When I was in graduate school for social work, and it was a human sexuality course. And the first assignment we had in this classroom was to write on, big whiteboards, every word that we had ever heard for every reproductive organ, every part of every body part. And it was fascinating.
It is.
Because depending on where you're from, what your culture is, there were words that I've never heard of. I've never heard them since. But what it did was it helped us to destigmatize the words, and so that I could sit, which helped because I then worked for Planned Parenthood. And
beautiful.
So I talked about sex all the time. And there was nothing somebody could say to me that would shock me or turn me red. It was like, okay, it's just another day.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. And it's only from talking about these things, learning about these things, that one can become comfortable. So the more we're educated, the more comfortable we can become. And yeah.
We need to say all of the words. We need to say the words for our body parts. We need to say the words for our grief. We need to say the words for our anger, our embarrassment, our joy.
Yeah.
We need to look at life, and we've talked about this because you're a comedian, also a stand-up, right?
I'm trying. Yeah. When I made a decision to get divorced, January 24th of 2021, I ended up hearing about an open mic night that was going to be held on my birthday. And I had signed up for these open mic details and information from DC Improv because my dad and I both love stand-up comedy. And my dad is a professor, but I think he secretly views himself as a stand-up that actually teaches economics as well. But he loves telling jokes and getting his students to laugh, and sometimes he makes fun of me, and I found that out. That was bad. But anyway, so I had been getting the DC Improv emails about a comedy class forever, and with the divorce decision, and I was grieving the end of my 20-year marriage. I said, for my birthday gift, it was COVID, you locked down. I'm like, what? I'm going to join this Zoom open mic. And not to sound real arrogant, but I'm like, I'm funnier than these people, because there were like 10 of them, 1 woman, 9 men, and like 3 of them were funny, but the rest, I'm like, God, this is horrible. And so I decided on that call to take the class. And then from there, I took more through DC Improv. And then I decided that I like it so much, and I needed to find a way to turn my hobby into something that would actually benefit my business. So in order to meet more seniors, because clearly seniors are my target audience, I have been networking with the senior independent living, assisted living facilities. And I was going to do storytelling evenings to go in and have the seniors tell different 5-minute, like icebreaker type Toastmaster speeches about their lives so that they could meet one another. But I changed it to now I do seasoned stand-up And I go in for these professional adults, these older adults, and entertain for a little bit as a way to hopefully come into the communities more often and get to really know them so that they can know, like, and like trust me. Then we can talk about planning their funeral, because they don't want me to come in and be like, you are all going to die one day and you all are closer to it than some of these other folks. So let's get working. Like, that's not a sales pitch. So they would kick me right out. So anyway, that's where now I host an open mic weekly. And because of the divorce, I started online dating, and that's how the name Empress came about. So one of the folks that pretended to be living in America that I actually figured out he was a 22-year-old Nigerian. A lot of the fake guys, like the ones in Africa, would call me princess and queen. So I figured that out pretty quickly. But this one that I'm still good friends with 2 years later, he began calling me Empress. And since I was messing with these scammers that I was outing within, like, they'd write me in like 3 sentences in, I would say, what part of Nigeria do you live in? Like, oh, you know Nigeria? I'm like, yes, very well. Where are you from? And so anyway, the ones that would call me queen and princess, I'm Empress, thank you very much. And so I just decided to kind of go with it as my comedy name.
I love it. Absolutely love it.
I wear a crown, and I instruct the audience that I'm an empress, so they have to laugh. I command it.
I like that. I like that a lot. I had something I was going to say, and it just went right out of my head.
That's all good.
Just trying to think what it was that, oh, well, it's not that important.
Well, so, I would like to invite you to my program, the Taboo Talks that I do. So maybe we could talk about that if that was something you were going to talk about, or do you know about my taboo group?
I do. It's on Facebook. Yes.
So it started in real life pre-COVID.
Okay.
And the first 2 Taboo Talks were about death and dying, because that was my original taboo that I wanted to address. And then as I was planning those and working it out, somebody came to me and said, I mentioned you to someone that does domestic violence prevention and talks and all that. And we did a talk about that. And then an animal communicator friend and I did a pet grief one. And then it just kind of started, the list of things I wanted to talk about really grew. And then COVID hit. And I'm like, crud, what are we going to do? I quickly, really quickly started doing virtual events as soon as COVID. It took me, because I'm an extreme optimist, took me like 3-4 weeks to realize this wasn't passing, because I just kept telling everyone, it's going to be done in a week. Oh, it's going to be done in a month. Oh my God, my kids are home from school full time.
3 years later.
Jesus, yeah. So I switched to the virtual events, eventually started getting paid for virtual events, and then made a decision that from research that we were never going to go back to the way it was, and that hybrid events could be of the future. So anyway, so the Taboo Talks, I do them in person again, but I'm finding that everybody wants to just join on Zoom. So I work with different individuals that either own a business or have expertise in something. And then we find a topic that people don't feel comfortable talking about as often. I worked with a tax professional, and we had a taboo talk about taxes, because it's not really taboo. We all pay them, correct? Or we all should be paying them. Maybe we don't all pay them. But like that, I like to correct people, like everything, death and taxes are the 2 things that are certain. Well, not really. Taxes are not certain. So, yeah. So anyway, the reason why I liked the topic of taxes is I have a pet peeve about people that file early with H&R Block to get their money faster, because H&R Block is taking some of that money. And then I also have a problem with why people wait so long to get their, get your money monthly by changing your W-4. Like, don't let the government hold on to your money. But you can't just talk to someone about these things, right? So that's where the Taboo Talks aren't just, the big taboos. Like, sex, money, politics. There are two topics my group does not talk about. And one, politics became so difficult during this crazy, decisive time period. And I lost friends, I lost members of the group, and I was constantly policing people being angry with one another. It was bad. And so I stopped with politics. And then, unfortunately, once I got to 1,700 members, actually, when I got to 1,000, some people joined the group because they want to be really taboo and a low level of taboo that it went from a conversation thing to where they wanted to share pictures and do other things. And I had to police that. And so I'm not for everybody, but I am very grateful that I have a community that is comfortable.
I think it's important. I mean, I understand the politics part, definitely. And, unfortunately, I think we're at a point in time where it's hard for people to listen. If somebody disagrees with you, then there's arguing and fighting and name calling. And, we're never going to move if we can't hear out the other side openly and fairly. I also know I'm not going to change the world. I think that it is what it is. And when people are willing to listen, we might have some peace.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And so even the people that approach me, because they send me private messages saying, why didn't you approve my post? Because it has to go through me. And then I'll explain that, incest, unfortunately, has become this big thing. They're all asking me to talk about it. So I have a standard answer now where I'm not judging you, but it is a trigger for members of my community that have been abused by family members. So if that's something important to you, please find another group. Like I can't, so I do my best to not, but I've had a few people kind of just snap at me, like what kind of taboo group that if you don't let this, can be talked about, but it is at the end of the day, still my group. I hate sounding like that, but I have to protect the people that have trusted me with the things they're sharing. And especially the ones who've been, abused by family members. I'm not going to, cause them to be. Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, so that has been like a really good experience for me having this group because it has also shown me how to set boundaries.
And boundaries are extremely important. And I'm learning those every day. I get reminders like,
every day. I feel like that's one of those lifelong projects.
Yep. And as long as I'm growing, I'm okay. I remind myself that, to be a seed in the ground is dark and cold and you feel like nothing is happening. And then all of a sudden you sprout up and maybe something beautiful happens. And so it's okay to be uncomfortable and to be dark and cold.
That's beautiful. Yeah, no, and I think another thing that being in this world of helping people with events that are surrounded, like they're grieving, I have been able to help people with this fear of letting the tears out. There are a lot of times where I've talked to people, like one of my best friends from school, her mom died, and we're on the phone, and she just didn't want to let it out. And I'm like, stop. And I wouldn't talk to her. I said, I'm not going to go on until you allow yourself to start crying. It's okay. And she actually cried on the phone. And I wonder how many other people actually let that happen for her. Probably not, because it makes everyone so uncomfortable.
It does. We tell people to grow up, to buck up.
Don't be so weak. Don't be so weak.
Hide it. And it's all because the rest of us aren't comfortable. I've done a grief recovery program training, which is called the Grief Recovery Method. And one of the things that we teach people is to be a heart with ears. No mouth. You don't need to say anything. Just be there and listen. Don't be looking at what's going on outside your window or your room. just hear them, let them talk, because we rarely have that opportunity. And that's what all of us need, whether
Yeah.
whether it's because of a death, a divorce,
Yeah.
change in a job. I mean, you took being downsized, right-sized, whatever you were out of a job, and turned it into a silver lining that you were able to grow from it. And I really believe that there is joy. It may be buried at the bottom of whatever
Mhm.
the life quake is, or the challenge,
Yeah.
or the
Yeah.
grief.
Yeah.
And if we open our eyes, we'll be able to discover it. There's always a lesson, and it's being able to find it. And we probably can't find it at the beginning. We need some
No.
distance, but it's there.
Yeah.
And
Oh, so true. So true.
and that's why this podcast, while it is about death and grief and loss, it's also meant to give people hope and help them find joy. That we need to find reasons to celebrate. And I'm
So
so
you're the
glad.
joy and death lady too.
Yeah.
We're both joy and death ladies.
I worked at a visiting nurse association, and I trained volunteers for the hospice program that a friend and I started. And she and I would go out and speak to women's groups. And one day we were watching all these other people auditioning to be selected by their women's groups for speaking. And we looked at each other, and I went, "I'm Amy." And she said, "Anna Marie. And we have come to talk to you about death and dying today." We looked
I
at each
love
other, we
it.
burst into hysterics. And we're like, it's part of life.
Yes,
You know, like
absolutely.
there are definitely horrible deaths. There
Yeah.
are suicides, there are murders. And yet, if you can believe that there's some kind of universal plan, and that things aren't happening to you, they're
Yeah.
happening for you. And
Oh,
it's,
beautiful. Yes.
you know, whatever someone's life story or their path is, really is tangential to your own, that there's something that you need to learn, and a silver
Yeah.
lining.
Yeah.
It helps us find our own joy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I am called in my family the one that lives in La La Land, because I try and find the sunshine and the silver lining and the good, right? And so my mom was, no parent wants to see their kid get divorced, right? And no parent that's from Iran wants that, because there's a bigger stigma, and like lots of people in the community are going to talk and all this, right? So my mother, who loved, I swear, loved my husband at times more than she loved me, all of a sudden gets on a bandwagon of, we told you not to marry him. Why didn't you listen to us? We told you not to marry him. And I would just ignore them. My child, who is now 14, she was probably 11 or 12 at the time, said to Grandma, if she didn't marry him, I wouldn't be here. And I was just so grateful that, yeah, I live in La La Land or whatever, but that at least I've passed that La La Land, zip code to my children, because they see it too. They see the positive in these moments of these, like my kid got her driver's license yesterday, 19 years old. 19 years old. And she was anxious, didn't want to get it because I had to push her and whatever. But then while we were there was a kiddo who had failed her permit test, just like my kid did a year ago. And then she was afraid to take it again, whatever. And so I'm like, oh, don't worry, kiddo. Like, I know you failed, but, my 19-year-old just got her license and, this is good. You can take more time to practice. And she goes, I'm 22. And then the mom was like, did you even study? And the daughter responds the way my daughter did a year ago. No. And then we were talking about on the way home, and I'm like, kid, I'm happy you failed last year. You clearly weren't ready. I'm glad she got the license now. right? So everyone else in my life that was sending her congratulation messages, about time, finally, like, and I'm like, why are we focusing on the fact that it took an extra couple of years? Let's focus on she did it. Let's just be proud of her and know that it's now is the right time, not back then. And now my mom is thrilled that I'm divorced because I'm so happy. And but like I hate it that I have to be the one to not only do it for myself that I'm happy, but to remind other negative people in my life to, hey, enough. Like, I'm happy this happened, or it happened for a very important reason. Like, it's hard being the woo woo happy person in the right in a world filled with people that want to wallow in the bullshit. Excuse me. Oh, I said not swearing. I almost made it to the end there.
So let me sort of move us back. You're in the DC area.
I am. I'm in Northern Virginia.
Do you work with people who are in other places in the country, or do you work mostly with local people?
Yeah, so if it's an event where I can't necessarily be there, I can still consult and offer assistance. I had someone from North Carolina that called, and unfortunately, I would have traveled to her to help her with the loss of her husband and planning the event. But she was so far along in the planning and was just on track. And I gave her a couple of tidbits, and she was good to go. I can help virtually. That's still something I do. Where if they want to have a hybrid event, I do actually with my events for people for example, this next Celebration of Life event, there are people around the world because he was a diplomat with USAID. The people around the world that can't come, they're going to join via Zoom. So I'm very grateful that I can do that. So yeah, I will travel. I can, like I said, help. We can put everything in place and I just won't be there on that day. I can even use my network to see if I can find someone to be there for them. But the funeral pre-planning program, that other thing I was mentioning, a final gift, that's done all over Zoom. So I'm planning to do that for individuals that live, expats that are retired in another country, things like that. So definitely a global company. Well, I'm hoping to be more global, but yeah, no. And if they're willing to send me to whatever location, I just have to share that, about dad jokes, right? You know what dad jokes are. So my season stand-up that I do, one of the things that has come about from this is that my dad writes a lot of my jokes for me. He'll call me and be like, "You're not going to play this one. I wrote another one. Like, what do you think?" And so I tell people that, hey, I'm going to be telling dad jokes. And I'm like, not those kind of dad jokes, my own dad jokes. And one thing that he really got bent out of shape about was in June, we were all invited to go to my cousin's destination wedding. So he wrote his best material, I think, and he was, what is it with these destination weddings? We have to fly there. We have to pay for an expensive hotel. We have to buy a gift. Like, this is just outrageous. He's like, you know what? To get them back, I'm going to have a destination funeral. That was brilliant. So yeah. So if you want to have a destination funeral and would like to have me, I'm actually trying to market living funerals, which are a new thing. Like you have a terminal diagnosis, to be there at your own.
I love that.
Isn't that great? Yeah. And then
I've always thought that it's such a shame to not be able to hear the eulogies and the wonderful things people say.
Right. Yeah. And also, like, those beautiful pictures that I put together, I've put together lots of pictures, and I'm thinking, wouldn't that person love to know how their life was outlined by their loved ones, right? But so me, on the other hand, I'm like, I'd really like to pick my own pictures for that slideshow and match it to music, because they might think I look pretty in this picture, but I might think I look horrible. But it was my great aunt's slideshow that I put together, and my absolute favorite picture turned out to be all three of her daughter's favorite pictures and other people that had seen it. Her husband and her were in bed in their like pajamas, and he was an amateur photographer, and he set it up, and it is the most remarkable picture. But she might be looking down from heaven going, why in the hell would you show me in my pajamas, right? But we all love the picture so much. But yeah, that made me start thinking about what, other people view as your memories, not necessarily. So yeah, I want to be there at my own thing. Why not? Hopefully I'll be 100-year-old lady with some feist in her still.
I definitely want people to tell me what they have to say while I
Yeah.
can still hear it and understand it. I'm not sure if I wanted to replace a memorial service, but I don't believe that we should wait until somebody is gone to think about the things that made them important to us. Life's too short, and we need all the love that we can get.
Yeah. Well, it's so nice doing this, Amy.
This was great. If people want to contact you, it's leaveittomee.com. Is that
so? Leave and then the number 2
okay?
me.com.
Yeah. And we're going to put that up so people can see it. Yeah. And on Facebook, if they're interested in the taboo topic.
Yeah. Taboo Talks and Thoughts. And it's, like I said, it's a group, but there's also a page. But you want to join the group. And then if they want to follow my comedy, it's Empress.Ladan on Instagram. So.
Okay, great.
Yay!
Well, this has been so much fun. I've really enjoyed it. And I look forward to hearing from our viewers if they have questions and where to go from here.
You're awesome. Thank you, Amy. I love this. Appreciate you.
If you liked what you heard on this podcast and want to hear more, please follow us and tell your friends. You can also find me on Facebook at Amy Lindner Lesser, Grief to Growth Life Coaching, and on LinkedIn at Amy Lindner Lesser.